Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, let's try it again. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to see you, and I'm so enthused to be here with you. First of all, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Tracy Bird and Alex and Peter and other staff that work in the office. Can we just give them a huge round of applause for their love and passion for students? Thank you for all of your hard work. And we're just so excited about this new year. And it is no secret that APU is a very relational campus, and we're all about helping students achieve student success. But a lot of the literature suggests that students who experience what we call sense of belonging, and some of the contemporary literature is called psychological sense of community, that those students, they tend to not just survive the college experience, but thrive. And so you're partnering with our first year students. That really means a lot. This past weekend, I had an opportunity to meet with the parents of the students that you will support this semester. And when they were hearing about Apex, I mean, they were enthused. I mean, people were yelling. And I was kind of sharing some details about Apex. People were in Phoenix saying, hallelujah, right? Like, I'm so glad my son needs an Apex mentor like last year. So I really, and I can't say this enough, on behalf of our department, we are so thankful for you and your willingness to be a part of this process and to really give back. And so I know that this semester is going to be filled with tremendous success. I guess the conversation that I'm leading this morning is focused on strengths. So all of you probably remember going through the beginnings course, taking the Strengths Finder. Yes, okay, all three of you, good, okay. And so we're going to be a little more intentional about referencing strengths this upcoming this semester. And even kind of languaging it differently and helping first year students see it differently. And so rather than just knowing, your top 5 and kind of celebrating that for a few weeks, it's our hope that students will see their top 5 as pathways to student success, pathways to thriving outcomes. And I know many of you received the momentum text on yesterday, is that correct? Yeah, and so some of the themes that are threaded throughout that book and some of the conversations that you'll have with students this semester are really tied to thriving outcomes. So, we want our students to be engaged learners, and we want them to demonstrate academic determination and positive perspective and social connectedness and appreciate diverse citizenship. And so those are well and good, right? But students are going to ask, well, how do I achieve these goals? And some students are very unclear when it comes to the path that leads to those specific outcomes. And so I'm very excited that Apex, as well as the efforts of our Alpha leaders, will place an emphasis on how their talent can be developed into strengths and utilized as distinct pathways to those outcomes that I just referenced. So I want all of you to know, you are friends of the Noel Strengths Academy because you are advocates of the strengths movement here at APU. And you're a part of some major work that's happening. This is revolutionary, life-changing, and you're a part of it. And I'm grateful to be in your company. So let's go ahead and start. You should have 2 handouts in front of you. The first one you've probably seen before, the Strengths Finder reference card. It details all 34 signature themes that are assessed by the Clifton Strengths Finder or the Strengths Quest, and that's probably the term that most of our first year students will be most familiar with. And then you should have like a half page for some fill-ins that I'll probably have you go through. Oh, that's a nice photo. All right, let's see here. What did I do? Did it just disappear on me?
Yeah, that's really strange.
That is odd, no worries. So this is what I would love for everybody to do in the space. If you will be so kind to share your top 5 with the person that's beside you. So one thing that we really want our first year students to do is be able to articulate how they're wired. And so we're hoping that you'll model that. To do very quickly for the next 45, maybe 50 minutes oh, see, we have a lot of relational streaks in this space. Like you're like, no, we're gonna keep talking. You know, you asked me to share my top 5, so I'm on streak 3. So give me a few moments. That is great. I know you're going to utilize those streaks to engage the students that are within your realm of influence. So for the next 50 minutes, what I would love for us to do is to basically highlight, how the strengths movement began, and then have some candid discussion about ways that you can be an advocate for the first year students that you're providing support for when it comes to strengths development. And that's really the emphasis. Can I see everybody's eyes on this, because this is very important. Strengths awareness by itself is not enough. So for first year students to know their top 5, that is great, and that is definitely the place to start. But we will not see significant change, significant outcomes as it relates to thriving just based on awareness. And so something that you're going to hear me share for most of the morning is this emphasis on strengths development. And so I'm really hoping that you will challenge students to think deeply about the way they can put their top 5 into action. Everybody say strengths development. Strengths development. Come on, say it with a little more flavor. Say strengths development. Strengths development. I like that. Strengths development. And so when we look at literature, contemporary literature, as it relates to strengths in higher education, students who tend to thrive and achieve all of those outcomes that we alluded to earlier, there's this emphasis on how do I develop my talent into strengths, and then how do I use my strengths to achieve optimal results in the classroom, but also across the campus. It's not just awareness, okay? And so we'll talk more about that in just a few moments, okay? So we talked about these thriving outcomes. You see them here on the screen. We talked about engaged learning. Valuing deep learning, making connections with content, as well as like maybe some of their desired professional goals. Then there's academic determination, students kind of taking ownership, feeling motivated through the process. Hey, some of you can relate to this. How many of you have ever in the past had an assignment that you knew you needed to start working on proactively, and you had the time to do it, you had the resources to complete it? And I want you to be honest with me, but you just didn't feel like doing it. Show of hands. Good. I'm glad we have some honesty in the room. Very good. All of us have experienced that before. And so what we're learning when it comes to college students is really not about time management. It's really about energy management. How do I increase my motivation? And so one unique way to increase motivation is to find ways to apply our talent, ways to leverage our top 5. Because this is one thing that we know. When we leverage the way that we're wired, what happens to our energy level? Not silence, but it increases. Good. I just wanted to make sure you're awake. Excellent. Okay, it increases. And so we really want to share with students that, hey, one way that you can remain engaged over the course of your academic journey is by familiarizing yourself with the tools that you have in your toolbox. Because when you use those tools, your energy level increases. Like some of you in this room, you're probably most energized when writing a paper when you identify sources, when you're identifying articles, when you're reading through literature, and maybe you have like the strength of input. And that energize, you're loving it. And sometimes you get lost in the literature. Okay, how many of you can relate to that? Yeah, a few of you, good. Now some of you, you prefer to communicate. If you can talk to someone about what you're learning, you're so engaged. How many of you can relate to that? So being in class, chatting about it, debating it, saying, girl, that ain't right. Right? Oh no, you're a little more scholastic. Excuse me, I disagree with that position. Right? But that energizes you. The point is that all of us have a path to increase our energy level. It's just a matter of landing on it, understanding it, and then finding a way to fully maximize it. And so you're going to help our students learn how to do that academically. So this academic determination is very critical. You see the last bullet at the bottom. Students knowing how to use their strengths to achieve academic tasks. Then we have positive perspective. So the ability to reframe, to use failure as feedback, being able to bounce back, approaching the academic journey with a sense of hope. For some of our students, just knowing that they have internal capacity to meet academic demand will increase their sense of hope in itself. I want you to know that some of the students that you will support, they have probably never ever heard anything complimentary about the way that they study or about the way that they write or that they have tools within them that they can use to be successful. So this is going to be very new for them. And some of them may look at you like, are you talking about me? And we're like, yeah, I'm talking about you. Like, dude, you got that empathy. You got that harmony. You got that communication and you got the woo. You can use that in the classroom. And by the way, the girls like the empathy and the harmony part too. All right, well, excuse me, academic determination. That's right, all right, good. There's also social connectedness, so being able to connect with the community, the APU community, and I think Alpha, for the most part, is kind of responsible for this, but you are playing a vital role in this too, because you're cultivating relationships with students. You're establishing rapport with students. Students are saying, hey, I'm not on this journey by myself. I have, what's your name? I have Gabriel in my corner. Yeah, right? Yeah, and they can say that about all of their Apex mentors. Lastly, we have diverse citizenship. But really the focus of our conversation is what Alex had on the screen earlier, engaged learning and academic determination. So how do students employ the way that they're designed to achieve meaningful results scholastically here at APU? Okay? So, how did the strengths movement begin? It started with Donald Clifton, asked the question, what would happen if we studied what is right with people? Let me know if you have any questions about any of this. So he conducted higher achiever research. How many of you have heard of this before? Okay, well, a couple of people. And so what he did, he interviewed over 250,000 people who were noted as high achievers. And he wanted to know, how did they achieve these optimal results that they accomplished? And so what he learned, and here are the findings from the research, that high achievers, they spend most of their time where? In areas of strength. And so it wasn't this preoccupation with weakness. And literature actually suggests that when we focus on our weaknesses and try to weakness fix to achieve meaningful results, that we are mediocre at best. Now, we should be aware of our weaknesses, but the aim, of the message that we're sharing with first-year students is, hey, what's your strengths potential? What talent do you bring to this campus? And then how can you use it? How can you use it to your advantage? There was also an emphasis on partnership and delegation. And so when I think of Apex, and I think of our student leaders who are interfacing with our first-year students, that's really partnership. And so that was also an outcome that was tied to high-achieving results. And you see the other findings there. Being able to apply strengths to overcome obstacles, capitalizing on strengths in new situations. Here's the premise of strengths. Individuals already have within themselves what they need to succeed. Okay? So I remember when I got married, it was my wife and I, next month it will be 16 years. 16 years that we've been married. Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's the thing, 16 years. So listen, real quickly, because I know this is a slight digression. I met my wife in graduate school. It was the first day of graduate school. And I remember walking in, and I felt like she was very attractive, sitting on the front row. And I said, I'm going to sit right behind her, you know. So I sat behind her, and I listened, and she made some comments. You know, she's just not attractive, but she's intelligent too. Wow, wow. And so I remember, like, maybe the third class session after sitting behind her, I asked her, I said, you know, that is a nice fragrance that you're wearing, right? A bit cheesy and corny, you know? And she turned around and looked at me, and I said, I know your boyfriend has to love that fragrance. I know. Just so smooth, right? Smooth operator. And she said, I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have a boyfriend. And I was thinking in my mind, but you will. I was using my strengths to connect, so I have the strengths. That's not related to academic determination at all, right? I was just in the moment of thinking about how long we've been together. That's great. But we did connect based on our strengths. Okay, getting back to the presentation. So students have exactly what they need to be successful. They have the tools in their toolbox. So what you're going to help them do is this. Everybody repeat after me. Say, name it.
Name it.
And then use it.
Use it.
Now, I have a toolbox at home in my garage, and I have a lot of tools. But some of them I have no idea what they're called. Neither do I know how to do what? Use them. So you can have tools in your possession, but if you don't know what they are and how to use them, it's really meaningless having them in your possession. So one major role that you will play around week 5 until the end of the semester is helping students articulate and name the tools that they have. But then the second piece is for them to really think about ways that they can put them to use. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. Very important. Here's a formal definition for strength. This is actually coined by Alex Lindley in the book From Average to A+. And he defines strength as a pre-existing capacity for a particular way of behaving, thinking, or feeling that is authentic, and we see this word, and energizing to the user, and enables optimal functioning, development, and performance. What's a synonym for optimal? Ideal, maybe? Best. And that's our desire. We really want our first year students to be the best version of themselves. So we don't want them to be like Johnny or like Jacob or like Jane, but we want them to be who they are and completely authentic about, you know, the strengths, or the talent that they have. Okay? All right. It's kind of flowing off the screen, but we'll make do with it. All right. So all of that research and everything that I just shared with you, that's kind of foundational content that you just need to be aware of. And I always like to share with students so you know that, you know, this strengths movement that's taking place here at APU is not off of a whim. That is founded on literature. And actually there's more strengths development research that's been done that kind of highlights the benefits of using a strengths development approach, especially when engaging first-year students, like increase in hope, increase in terms of perceived academic control, academic motivation, like we referenced a little bit earlier. And so there are tremendous gains that students can make if they understand the way that they're wired and they discover creative ways to apply their wiring in the classroom. Okay? So you have the half page handout. So I'm going to have you write down just a few things that may be useful for you, you know, as we think about ways that you can support students in their strengths development. Okay? So first of all, we want to send the message to students that they have talent. Okay, if I can see your eyes on this, because this is so critical in terms of how we language this. So most students, after they take the Clifton Strengths Finder week 5, and they receive the results, and whatever the themes are, they're going to naturally think that those top 5 are their what? Their what? Their strengths. Because the instrument's called the Clifton Strengths Finder, so they think, hey, well, these are my strengths. I am really asking that every person in this room, that you're very intentional about referring to the top 5 themes as areas of talent. Everybody got that? Top 5, what are they for our first year students?
Areas of talent.
You got it, areas of talent. And it's important that you share that, okay? Because talent sends the message that there is room for development. When we use the term strength, the result of a strength or an applied strength is optimal results. And so remember, for our first year students, they're just discovering the way that they're wired. They're just discovering what, talent they have. This is something else that we really, you don't have to share this with students, but I would love for you to keep this, in mind. Talent by itself is really not enough, right? So there's plenty of people who have intellectual talent or athletic talent, but if that talent isn't developed, it doesn't achieve what? Meaningful outcomes and results. And so the emphasis is really on sharing with students, hey, you have great talent. Okay? By the way, all 34 signature themes, they're good. And some of you will be met with this, like, you'll have a first year student say, hey, I have command. That is terrible. Because sometimes people kind of perceive command as being what? Bossy. But that's really the shadow side of that theme. And so we really want to affirm that theme for students so that they see the value and see it as talent. That this is great. That you can definitely use command. In leadership, in a class discussion, if you want to kind of take control in a team project, you're natural at that. You're natural. Okay? So take a look at the formal definition for talent. Talent is naturally recurring patterns of thinking, feeling, and behavior, or behaving, that can be productively applied. And one term that you probably want to use in your conversation is the term natural. Because when many of you in this room, when you think about your top 5, it really speaks to your natural inclinations. So let me give you an example. So one of my top 5 signature themes is achiever. And achiever is a strength for me. Okay? It's natural for me to work from a to-do list because I'm all about productivity. I want to get as much done with the time that I have. How many of you have achiever in the room? Yeah, a lot of achiever on APU's campus. Achiever. How many of you have to-do lists? And you love it. Okay, quick question. How do you feel when you check that box? Some of you just had them on your own. That's good. Oh, it feels so good. And then others of you, if you don't have achiever in your top 5, you're like, I don't get that. Right? I don't get that. That's not me. But people with achiever, they're energized by doing. The more that I complete, the more energized I become. Okay? That's the way that we're wired. So how do we tap into these natural inclinations? I love this thought by Chip Anderson, and many of you have this thought actually on the handout. Top achievers build their academic and personal lives, later their careers, on their talents. They use those talents as the foundation of strengths development, not strengths awareness, but strengths development. And they apply those strengths to produce excellence. So step 1 that we really want to emphasize to first year students, discover your talent. Please write that down. That's step 1. And there's a space on the handout. Discover your talent. How are you wired? How are you wired? What are your natural inclinations? How do you make decisions? How did you achieve meaningful results when you were in high school? What energizes you? See, these are questions that you can pose to a student so that they become more insightful about their capacity. We're going to have more conversations about reflective questions that you can ask students that you're interfacing with so that they can gain some clarity on how they're wired. Okay? So, step 1, what is it again? Come on, say it with some energy.
Discover your talent.
Yeah, that's what you want to be preaching to your first year student. Discover your talent. So as soon as they take the Clifton Strengths Finder, hey, what's your top 5? They go through. Oh, were you ready to share your top 5?
No, you were just looking at me. So
I was. So that was a little awkward, wasn't it? You're like, wait, you wanted me to respond? Share with us your top 5 if you don't mind.
Achievers, strategic, Input, learner, connectedness.
Ah, great talent. That's it. I'm being an Apex mentor in that moment. Great talent. Great. Watch this. What's your name?
Not me.
Rebecca?
Thank you.
All right, Rebecca, how do you plan to use your talent here at APU? And then students will look at you like they're like, oh. And then you say, that's okay, let's think about it maybe for the next couple of weeks. You know, maybe before we meet the next time, I would love you to be prepared to answer that question. How are you going to use your talent here at APU? They're great tools, but tools are for using. Oh, I like that one. Let me write that down. I like that. Tools are for, how do you plan to use, your talent here at APU? Specifically academically. Okay, so that's step one, discover your talent. All right. So, obviously these are all 34 signature themes that are on the screen. And so your students, they may have any combination of these themes. I still want to emphasize that all 34 themes are what? All 34 themes are? It doesn't matter what the constellation is, okay? So some of your students, they may have what we call thinking talent, okay? Thinking talent. Does anybody recognize this guy right here? Have any of you read the book Outliers? Or seen the Outliers? Or David and Goliath? Okay, this is Malcolm Gladwell. And I had an opportunity to meet Malcolm in Orange County at a business summit. And a real cool guy, but he is definitely a deep thinker. So based on what you know about thinking talent, those themes at the bottom of the screen, when are people with thinking talent most energized? And think about it. Yeah. When they're learning, first of all, when they're especially like learning new information and even digging deep when it comes to the learning process. Energized. And sometimes you can't see it in their face, but inside they're just turning cartwheels, right? It's good. Good. How else do you know? What else energizes like a person with thinking talent?
When you're around other people who are thinking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when they're surrounded by other people who value depth. Well, look, you just shared some strategies that you can pass along to students who may have thinking talent. Surround yourselves with people who love to engage in deep conversations. Take courses that really challenge you to go deep. Something else we know, most thinking talent is correlated with introversion on the MBTI. So some of you have taken the Myers-Briggs typology indicator. And so sometimes people with thinking talent, they like to be in spaces by themselves. So that sometimes they don't like to be in spaces that's heavily, populated. They want to find a space under the tree with a vanilla latte and one of their favorite books, and they are just so energized in that space. And so maybe that's a recommendation that we offer to select students. That you don't always have to study within the context of a group, but sometimes you need to find space and time where you can study independently. And that's a time that you're going to be most energized. Malcolm has some cool hair, doesn't he? Real cool hair, all right? So some of your students may have thinking talent. Other students may have what we call relational talent, okay? Does anybody recognize this guy? Yeah, Shaquille O'Neal. So last year I spoke at a conference in Atlanta, and at the end of the day I decided I'm going to the workout floor, and so I was lifting some weights, and then I felt this huge arm just come across my chest, like boom, and it felt like a log. I kind of lost my breath, and I turned around, and all I saw was a chest. And so then I looked up, and I'm like, what's up, Shaq? So this is what Shaq said to me, and let me see if I can reenact it. What up, big dog? So for 15, 20 minutes, Shaq and I, we worked out together. And one thing that I learned just from observing Shaq is that he has a good combination of relational strengths. That he tends to be most energized when he's connecting with others. He was all over the gym. speaking to people, giving people dab, telling jokes. And I'm like, Shaq, you have more positivity than I do, right? So it was a lot of fun. Some of your students may be wired this way. And so you have to think, how can they use that as an asset in the classroom? And so like for most students who have relational strengths, having discussions in the classroom, do they like it? Yes, typically they do. They like to work in small groups. No? They like to work on team projects. If they had to choose between a team project or a research paper, what are they choosing? Team project. Okay? They love to learn in small groups or even larger groups. And so those are some suggestions that you can offer to students who may have these relational, these areas of talent. Now, I hear some of you telepathically communicating with me. So some of you are wondering, if a student has relational talent, can they also be thoughtful? And can they go deep when it comes to academic content? And what is your response to that question? Yeah, I'm so glad you were emphatic. You know, absolutely. But they approach that process what? Differently. Differently. Okay, let me ask you this. Individuals who have thinking talent, can they also demonstrate a high level of social aptitude? Absolutely. But cultivating relationships looks what? Differently for them. Okay? So please, you know, when you're having these conversations with students, we don't want them to leave thinking, well, I have relational talent, so that means I'm not smart. I'm just good at talking with people or connecting with people. And so we want to dispel that notion immediately and suggest to them that, hey, the talent that you have, even though it's relationally inclined, it can definitely be leveraged to achieve optimal results in the classroom. Okay? All right. So we saw thinking talent, relational talent. There's also influencing talent. Okay? And some of you are wondering, like, who are those guys on the screen? So some of you may be familiar with the guy on the left. That's Kenny the Jet Smith. Any of you that are NBA fans, he's a pretty popular commentator on TNT. And then the guy on the right is my son. Hey, good looking guy, isn't he? Yeah, gets his looks from his mom, not dad at all, right? But my son, I know without a shadow of a doubt, has competition as one of his top strengths. Okay, so like even this past Saturday, before I woke up, I felt somebody breathing over me. And I opened my eyes and my son's face is like right here. And this is what he says to me. I woke up before you, Dad. Like, if you don't get out of my room, right? Listen, that's the way that he's wired. That motivates him. So he has this desire to be the best. Whatever he's affiliated with, it doesn't matter if it's playing his piano, or playing travel basketball, or playing his trumpet, or performing on a test at school. He wants the highest mark possible. That's what motivates, that's what drives him. Some of the students that you will interface with, they are wired that way. And so you don't want to say, oh, that can create distance in relationships, right? No, you want to say, hey, that's nice talent. How can you use that in the classroom? Okay? And you see some of the other themes like activator, maximizer. Okay? Any of you have maximizer in the room? Maximizer? Anybody have woo in the room? Woo? Okay. Some woo fighters in the room? Good. Woo is an acronym for what? Winning others over. And so students who have woo, when they walk into the classroom, they're looking for what? I'm looking to make connections. They see all of these prospective friends. I don't see strangers. I see people that I need to get to know. I need to get some phone numbers in this space, right? That's what they're thinking. I want to make some connections. I want to learn in community. And so that really energizes people with influencing. Also, people with influencing, they like discourse and debate. So they love to be engaged in conversation where you go back and forth, and I'm trying to get you to buy into my position. And that tends to energize them. Okay? The last The last class is executing talent. Okay? What was the first class that I shared with you? Thinking talent. Come on, everybody together. The first one is thinking talent. Second, relational talent. Number 3 was influencing talent. And then executing. Good. So you see achiever, you see consistency, deliberative, discipline. Okay? So most people with executing talent, they're always thinking of ways to take the content and place it into action. So there is this emphasis on relevance. How am I going to apply what I'm learning in this course down the road? Okay? Usually there's a high level of value on predictability, structure, but they're always thinking, how am I going to use this? They're even thinking, how can I use this information today or tomorrow or after graduation? That tends to be a natural orientation for them. Okay? Now, that's just one way to kind of to categorize the talent themes. Okay? But the bottom line is that we just want to affirm. We want to affirm whatever the talent the first-year students have. We want to let them know that it's good. And then we want to follow up with the succeeding question, well, how do you intend to use your talent here at APU? Okay, pop quiz. Pop quiz. When students come to you with their top 5, how are you going to refer to them? Not as strengths, but as areas of talent. That is so important. That is so important. Okay? Because areas of talent, what does that communicate to the student? That there is room for development. You got it. You got it. Good. Good. Okay. So, I love these thoughts. One is by Clifton Anderson and Schreiner in the book Strengths Quest. It's the second edition of the book. As you use your talents over and over again, they will become refined. You will gain experience, and through that experience, you will gain the knowledge and skills that will combine with your talents to create strength. Practice, practice, practice. Okay? I love this thought by Malcolm Gladwell. You saw his photo earlier. Practice isn't the thing you do once you're good. It's the thing you do that makes you good. At the heart of the development process is one word. What is that word? It's practice. How are you going to put your talent into practice? Hear me out. I think one of the greatest ways that the strengths movement is gaining traction, particularly in higher education, is not by conversation, even though I think intentional conversations are good, but I think it's through modeling. So some of your first-year students, they're going to look at you, and they're going to ask you, what are your top 5? And you can share them, and you can say, hey, this is the way that I interact with people. And when they see that you're alive and capable of leveraging your top 5, that compels them to do the same. I would even say it liberates them to follow suit. I know some of you, any psychology students in the room? Okay. How many of you remember the Bobo doll study by Albert Bandura, social learning theory? It's the idea that we learn through observation. It's also noted as observational learning. So a lot of your students, they will pay attention to you. And when they see you utilizing your strengths to successfully connect with them and to advise them, you're like, man, she's cool. What's your name?
Kendall?
Huh?
Kendall?
Kendall's cool. She knows how to work her strengths. I like it. How did you do that? And then they'll be compelled to do the same, okay? Step 2, you want to write this down. Develop your strengths. So step 1, what was step 1? Discover your talent. Step 2, anything you can do, any conversation you can have that prompts or challenge the students that you interface with to develop their strengths. That's important, okay? To develop their strengths. And so we have some reflective prompts that we're going to share with you that can help students become a little more insightful and to think about ways that they can put their talent into practice. All right? All right. I'm going to bypass that video. So here's the strengths development cycle. Some of you, you should have on your handout, there's 4 bullets underneath step 2. Do you have that on your handout? Yes? So let me give you just some practical ways that you can help students develop their talent into strengths. So first it starts with assessment. Okay, it starts with assessment. So it's the student identifying their areas of talent. And so that happens when they take the Clifton Strengths Finder. They discover their top 5. Okay? So that's the first place to start. If for some reason you have a student and they have no idea what their top 5 and they seem to be clueless, you want to encourage them. Hey, take the Clifton Strengths Finder, the top 5. Okay? And we'll give you more information in terms of the code should actually be in the book. But if they have some issue with that, we'll probably encourage you to refer them to our department, okay, the Noel Strengths Academy, and we'll work with them, okay? But that's the first step, assessment. What are your areas of talent? Being able to name it, being able to articulate it. I think it's cool for you to walk up to a person, hey, what are your top 5? And they're like, give me at least 3 out of the 5. And they're like, okay, give me 1 out of the 5. Achiever, good. Next week, I want to know all 5. So really challenge them to not just take the test and allow it to be a meaningless exercise, but to really commit this information to memory, to internalize it, okay? Now, I hear some of you telepathically thinking now. So if we have the expectation for our first year students to know their top 5, guess what expectation we have for all of our student leaders and mentors? You got to know your top 5. How many of you know your top 5 like right now? I mean, you could just call them out. Okay, I want you to practice. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. Turn to the person beside you. Share your top 5. Ready? Go. Okay, so thank you so much for honoring that request. How many of you feel pretty comfortable with articulating your top 5? Okay, excellent. Excellent. The next step, and let's reserve this for the conversation that we'll have at lunch, being able to share with the person how you use your top 5 academically. Okay? And so some of you are very clear in terms of, hey, I know exactly how I use my top 5 strengths. For some of you in this room, I will say that your top 5 reflects your strengths. For others, you know, maybe some of the things reflect talent and others reflect strength. But be able to speak and, you know, to students and say, hey, here are the ways that I'm using my top 5 as pathways to my academic success. Okay? So be thinking about that. And you may want to jot down some notes and be prepared to speak to that around lunchtime, okay? The second A, you want to jot this down, affirmation. So you want to confirm the talent and strengths potential through 2 processes I think that you can utilize. One, personal reflection. So asking the student, hey, when are you energized in the classroom? When are you most energized? And some students say, well, when I'm participating in an in-class discussion. Oh, when you think about your response, how does that relate to some of the themes in your top 5? And then students say, oh, I never thought about that. And then you encourage them, well, do that more and to a greater level of intensity. And guess what's going to happen to your energy level in the classroom? It's going to increase. Yes?
I just had a question
Yeah.
about something that came up. So I have a friend who has a lot of relational strengths.
Yes.
And he really struggles in the classroom where they're just lecturing at you.
Right.
And there's not a lot of discussion because the information just needs to be relayed.
Yes.
So how do they become engaged in the classroom and like feel that they're learning? Because he struggles with feeling like he actually learned something.
I love that. What is your name?
Rachel.
Excellent question. And I want to table it. Okay? When I leave, you're going to process a scenario that basically outlines that situation. And it's a student who's in a class that tends to be heavily lectured. And so the instructor, for the most part, is using an auditory approach in delivering content. But the student has relational strengths. how does the student make that learning engaging? So I want you to think about that in groups, and then I have some suggestions for you at lunch when we process that scenario. It's a wonderful question. And then even the opposite for people with thinking strengths, who probably prefer to hear like a lecture, but then the instructor's always dividing everybody into groups. Oh my goodness, do we have to get in small groups again? Sometimes students with the thinking talent, they excuse themselves to the restroom for 20 minutes. I just need a break. I cannot break up into another group. I need a break, right? And so that's the way that they try to preserve their energy. So we're going to process that together. Wonderful question. Wonderful question. So affirmation, having them personally reflect on what they find to be energizing. The other one is getting feedback. And so something that we're going to suggest a little bit later is having students take their top 5 report and share with maybe their parents or someone who knows them well. And say, hey, just let them read over your report and ask them, what do you think? Do you think those terms and those descriptions characterize the way that I think, who I am? And what's the common response that they hear? The yes. I remember I had one student that walked into my office. No, Dr. K, the first 4, they resonate with me, but that 5th one, I don't get it. I don't think that's me. I said, okay, listen. You're going home this weekend, right? She's like, yeah. I want you, who are you close to in your home? She said, well, my sister's going to be, my parents are actually out of town. I said, I want you to, your big sister, have her read over your report and get her feedback. Does she think that all of those signature things reflect who you are? Specifically that one that doesn't resonate with you. She came back to my office like a week later. I said, what did your sister say? I said, she said, you literally want to hear my, I said, yeah, I want to know exactly what your sister said. She said, my sister said this, girl, quit playing. That is you, right? And so that's exactly what the student needed to hear to own that signature theme and to even see it as a resource. And so I think that's a great exercise for you to challenge, some of the students that you work with to do. Okay, so affirmation. Hey, what's the purpose of affirmation? What's the purpose of affirmation? What purpose does it serve?
Confirmation?
Yes, it increases their level of confidence. And if they're confident about the tools that they have, it's very likely that they're going to do what?
Do well.
To do well and use them. Thank you. What's your name?
Donovan.
Donovan, thank you for sharing. It's good to see you again, by the way, Donovan. Yeah. Right? The third A is application. Application. Identify or create ways to place your talent into action. To put them into practice. And it's really asking the student, hey, how can you put these things into action? Now, we do understand that everybody in this room, that you are not like a certified strengths trainer. And so we do not have the expectation for you to provide coaching. Okay? And we'll share with you some resources that are available. Okay? Like Alex is strengths certified. She went through a 2-day training to reflect on strengths as it relates to leadership and student success. There are others on this campus who are very knowledgeable of strengths. Dr. Katie Tangenberg in the back. Peter Smart. These are people who have been around strength. Tracy Burke. Tracy actually went through the certification training. So you have them as a resource, but we want to share with you some other resources that are sponsored by our department. So if you feel like students need a deeper conversation about their unique talent, where you can, there's a place where you can refer them. But we would like for all of you to be competent at asking questions that challenge students to think deeply. I don't know about you, but I think sometimes there's more power in a question than a response. Because a question challenges students to think critically, to reflect, to go through the process of introspection. So during lunch, we're going to do this together. What are some questions that we want to pose to our students, these first-year students, so that they're thinking about their God-given design, their areas of talent? Okay? The first A was? Assessment. Good. The second A? The second A was affirmation. The third A? Application. This is the fourth one. Accountability. Accountability. So grateful for all of you. Because students are not just going to have one conversation about their top 5. But you're going to pose a question. And maybe for some of you, you'll be able to retain the question that you pose, but for others of you, I would recommend that you write it down. And so when you see that student again, you actually follow up. Hey, remember we were talking about your top 5? And you know, I asked you, hey, how are you going to put those top 5 into action here? I'm curious, do you have a response? At least for 2 of them, just share 2 of them. That level of accountability keeps students thinking about their design and way that they can wire them. I love this. Partner with a peer mentor leader who will encourage you to continue to make progress with your talent. That's what we're doing for our first-year students. Okay? Let's go through the 4 A's again. The practical steps to taking talent to strength. Let's go through them real loud. First A is assessment. You got it. The second A is affirmation. Confirming their talent. Confirming their talent. May I share one more thing with the affirmation piece? So initially, when they share their top 5 with you, you want to affirm them for, learning what their top 5 are. But beyond that time, you really want to affirm them for taking action. So I hope this is not confusing. So we don't want to place too much emphasis on how they're wired, even though that's important. That's good. All the themes are good. But we really want to affirm them for applying the way that they're wired. Does everybody understand that? Does that make sense? So it's one thing to say, man, Keith, I love it that you have achiever, positivity, belief, includer, and develop. That's great, rah, rah. And I think that's okay for the first conversation. But for succeeding conversations, I think the focus should be on affirming a student for putting their natural wiring into practice. So give me an example of how you're using it. And when they share that, that's what I'm talking about. That's great. I love that. Okay? Because it's affirming them for engaging the process. For engaging the process. For not just purchasing the tool or being able to name the tool. My wife doesn't care if I know the name of a tool, but my wife is happy when I use that tool to take care of something on my to-do list. Right? And I have a long to-do list, by the way. You get the point. First A is assessment. Second A is affirmation. Third A is application. Fourth A, you got it. It's a great group. Great group. All right. Step 3, build on your strengths. So you develop talent. First you discover your talent. Then there's this commitment to developing talent into strength. Then the third phase is, hey, how do you build? How do you build on your natural inclinations? Okay? So, one question that we'll definitely pose is, hey, how can you use your talent or your the strengths that you're developing or strengths potential to excel academically. To excel academically. How are you going to use it in the classroom? And being real practical, how are you going to use it when you write a research paper? Or when you have to deliver an oral presentation? Okay? How can you use your talent? And they may not know the answer to that. And looking at their strengths, you may not know the answer to that. So you may want to refer them to our department, and we have resources that are available to help them think through those questions. How are you going to cultivate healthy relationships, considering the talent that you have? You can share with them how you cultivate relationships with your unique constellation of strengths, and encourage them to go on the journey of learning ways that they can apply their talent to cultivate meaningful relationships. Okay? So at lunch, we're going to come up with questions together that we can pose that really challenge the student to think about their capacity and ways that they can apply their top 5, particularly in the classroom. To achieve the 2 outcomes of engaged learning and then academic determination. Does that sound good, everybody? Okay, good. Quick questions. I have like 5 minutes. Questions that you have. Yes, please.
Is it pretty common for strengths to change depending on where you are in your walk of life?
Sometimes they will, because our strengths reflect what we call implicit values, what we deem as important. So sometimes as we progress through different developmental milestones, or some people would even class them as seasons in your life, sometimes there can be some variation. Typically not, though. Like you'll rarely see like a complete overhaul in terms of one's top 5. So a person takes the instrument for the first time, they have one set of talent themes, but then they take it again maybe a year later and then they have a completely different. If that's the case, it's very likely that one of those times when they took the instrument, they were responding, I hate to use the term, but inauthentically. Like most of you remember when you took the instrument, there was a timer. How many of you remember that? The timer, and you had to make a selection rather quickly because it wants you to go with your gut feeling, your natural inclination. Well, I have talked to some students, they respond to items thinking about who they want to be rather than who they are. Or they think about a role that they want to be in. And so they're thinking, well, what's the best response that fits that role? Okay? And so when that happens, the results are obviously not accurate in terms of describing the way that person thinks or behaves. I don't know if we want to broach that conversation with our first-year students. I think for all of you as mature students, it's good to know that. But for first-year students, we just want to encourage them, hey, you have your top 5. These are your top resources. How do you make the most of them? Very good question. Okay, thank you. Other questions?
I'm just wondering if you can, it dovetails off that one. Why do they take it at the time of the semester they do?
Yeah. So that's an excellent question. So they're taking it week 5. And so we could have had, and some universities, they actually have students take the instrument before they even arrive on campus. And we've actually partnered with some schools that do that. But we really see the value in students coming on campus, acclimating to the culture, making meaningful connections, and even having some level of rapport with their student leaders and mentors. Like it's so important. Like if you're trying to give me advice about my top 5 at the beginning of the semester, I'm like, you don't even know me. But if you've been walking with me for 5 weeks and I can sense that you have my best welfare in mind, well, I'm really attentive to what you have to share. And so one of the reasons why we picked week 5 is for that purpose. The other reason too, the reason why they're exposed to the Clifton Strengths Finder the first semester that they're here is because we want them to enter their academic journey with a sense of capacity. I mean, let's face it, and some of you may have experienced this, maybe at your home high school, you were the valedictorian, you were the salutatorian, you were the cream of the crop. But then you come to a college campus and you're listening to conversations in the classroom, you're listening to comments by the person beside you, and you're like, I'm not the only smart cookie in this place, right? And there's increase in rigor and there's a lot of change. And so sometimes students' confidence may take a hit. I'm no longer the big fish in a small pond. I'm like a small fish in a huge pond of excellent learners. And so we want them to really glean confidence from knowing their capacity as well. Katie, you may want to add to that as well. Anything else to add to that?
No, I just think that it's a really important point because, I think sometimes with strengths we underestimate the power of the environment, and I think certain environments ask you to draw out more of your strengths. And to me, seriously, going from like a faculty member where it's research to an administrator, it's just like it's so much more about being outgoing, out of the office, trying to coordinate systems. That's why I love being a social worker in many ways. But depending on what environment you're in and what's asked of you, sometimes it really requires different development of strengths, and sometimes they're not your default. So I'm thinking an example for Apex that we've talked about a little bit, Alex, Tracy, and I, is some instructors might want you to help lead small group discussions, and that might not be like one of your strengths, talent kind of most, inclined that way, but that might be a development area, but that's something for you to talk about with faculty in terms of, how do your strengths complement what their classroom needs are, and things like that.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. One other piece I would like to add And let me share an example first. So I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. Has anybody ever visited Nashville? Okay. Yeah. Show of hands, have you been to Nashville before? Okay, great, great. Any country music fans in the room? Yeah, born and raised in Nashville, not a country music fan. I don't know what happened. But listen, people in the South talk different than people on the West Coast, right? And so when you go to the South, like my language, and some of you can probably still hear a little Southern, you know, but it's become a more refined. But when I go back home, guess what? That dialect comes back, and it's its own language. I know some of you are like, where are you going with this? I also believe that by students discovering their top 5, it's a great asset that we can leverage to promote sense of belonging. It's a language that everybody knows, and now I can speak it. It relates to me. My professor, it's not uncommon for instructors the first day that they stand in front of their classes to share their top 5. And so like, what is that? I've never heard of a woo and a achiever and what is that? Right? And then once they're acquainted with the language set, they're like, oh, I'm in. I'm a part of the community. So how can we leverage the language set as a resource in promoting inclusion? Okay? So something to think about. Yeah.
This may be a rumor, just like confirmation if it's true or not. But I've heard that a lot of freshmen come in and they might have adaptability because they're not sure about the future and they're kind of exploring majors. Is that a trend we should be aware of? Is it accurate?
That is a great question. Right now, we do not have the results, you know, because students haven't taken the Clifton Strengths Finder, so we don't know the high frequency strengths for this incoming class. I will say within our student body, adaptability tends to be a high frequency strength along with developer. So that's important to note. So when we think about adaptability, it's a student who tends to be more present oriented. So kind of here and now. Like some of you may have the strength of, how many of you have futuristic in your top 5? So some of you, before you were even admitted to APU, you were thinking about graduation, right? Like I can see myself in the cap and gown, John Wallace will be shaking my hand, and you're not even in the class yet, right? That's just a natural orientation for you. And so you want to bear that in mind in terms of, and I will say this, that all students are oriented to at least 3 of those strengths that are tied to time. Context, adaptability, or futuristic. How can you use that information as a resource? So if you have a student who has context, you want to ask them, hey, tell me about the success that you achieved back in high school. They find that kind of conversation to be what? Energizing. Or for a student who has futuristic, hey, how do you plan to use your strength of futuristic? That, 3 years from now. That energizes them. Okay? So framing the conversation based on their orientation to time. Listen, I'm so sorry, but I've got to transition our time. Time goes by fast when you're having fun, you know? So let me just give you a heads up on what to expect. So for the next, I guess around 30, 35 minutes, maybe even 40 minutes, you're going to process in small groups 2 scenarios, okay? And situations that are realistic, students may encounter. And so there are 2 prompts with each of the scenarios, okay? One is for you to reflect on ways that you're going to apply your unique constellation of strengths to connect with the student, and then advice that you can give the student based on the situation and the talent that they have, okay? And so Alex will be in the room, Dr. Tingenberg will be in the room, Peter will be in the room, so they'll be glad to be a resource, but we're going to process this together at lunch, okay? And then I also want to entertain other questions that you have. And then also remember at lunch, be prepared to articulate ways that you leverage your top 5 talent or strengths academically. Does everybody got it? Does that make sense? Hey, thank you so much for your attention. You are awesome this morning. Thank you so much. So good. So good.